Hey, everybody, welcome back to The Future Is Now podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm excited for episode number 3. We got my good friend Joe Little from Mission Church in California joining us today. He's taken on a youth pastor job this past year, and so we're just going to be talking about youth pastoring in the middle of COVID, how he has adjusted to doing a big move from Florida to California. So it was a great conversation. I hope that it blesses you. Wherever you're listening, podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, make sure that you subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you drop a comment and let me know that you subscribed. It's going to be an amazing episode. Here we go. Well, hey, Joe, thank you so much for coming on to The Future Is Now podcast episode 3. We're glad to have you today.
Dude, thanks for having me, man. I'm so excited to be here. This is gonna be so fun.
Yeah. So, I know that we have known each other, kind of grown closer. We kind of did that weird, like we knew each other from other people, like
Like I
stalking
felt
on
like I knew you before I
Instagram.
met you.
Exactly. Yeah. Liking pictures, commenting. But I'm glad that, we finally have formed a friendship. And so for those that are listening, I kind of want to start off with you explaining kind of where you come from, kind of the places that you've been, and then we'll touch on where you are now. But just so they can have a base going forward of where you are and what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I grew up in Lansing, Michigan. Huge Michigan State fan. Go Green. And after honestly living there, I lived there until I was about 17, and then my whole family. I grew up in church. My parents were ministers at the church that we were at, and the whole church moved down to Florida to help launch another church. So it's a crazy story. But we pretty much moved to Florida my senior year of high school, and I grew up playing basketball pretty much my entire life. Loved basketball, was obsessed with basketball. So my senior year comes around, and all of the colleges in Michigan that I had interest in me, and were thinking about maybe having me go out to a tryout, things like that. All the interest just kind of went away because it's like, okay, where'd this guy go? Like, this guy's not here anymore. So honestly, after my senior year of high school had ended with the season, I was still in high school. I just started sending out emails to a ton of coaches. So literally like 50 to 70 coaches just in the Florida, Georgia, Alabama, just area, just emailed a bunch of coaches and sent them my highlight tape, sent them like, hey, my name's Joe Little. I'm 6'5". I'd love to try out for your team. And one coach emailed me back, and it was the coach at Southeastern University. And it was crazy. So I go out to Southeastern. I try out for the team, play the worst basketball of my life. It was terrible. I literally left thinking, all right, I guess I'm just going to go get my degree at like a four-year school, and we'll figure out what I'm going to do. But then about a week later, I got a call saying, hey, like, you made the team. We'd love for you to come out and join the team. So I ended up playing basketball there, and it's a Christian university. And I remember the first weekend there, they had this huge church service. And the campus pastor there preached, and I had grown up in church, like I said, but I really like heard the gospel preach, and it felt like it was the first time, like it was just an experience with God, personally, not like through my family or things like that. So then as time just went on and just playing basketball, and I really just felt that call, just call to be a pastor. And I eventually wanted to be a youth pastor and work in a church and serve God in that kind of realm. So when I graduated, I met my wife my senior year of college. Shout out to my wife, Paige Little, the GOAT. She's awesome. So I met her my senior year, and she had moved down to Florida because the campus pastor at Southeastern was planning a church in Florida. So she moved down to kind of help with that. So I was like, yeah, I'll stick around. She's sticking around. I'll stick around.
Come on.
So I kind of stuck around for 4 years. We ended up getting married. We were married for 2 years. And then the pastor there kind of reached out to me, and he said, hey, Joe, my best friend just planted a church in California in the Bay Area. And he said he's looking for a youth pastor, and I think you'd be perfect for it. So we kind of flew out, loved it. I mean, the Bay Area is amazing. We love it. It's amazing out here in Cali. And we just really felt God called us out here, and we moved. And the day we moved, the shelter in place went into effect, and we've been locked down ever since. But here we are.
Exactly. So you guys moved down to California. And that was a pretty obviously a big decision. And so it was it a year after you guys were married that you moved down about?
So about two, like we had
Okay.
just crossed two.
Gotcha. So obviously like moving across the country is a pretty big decision for you and your wife. And so, and I don't know about you, but the transition for me of like when I was single, I was like down, pretty much down for anything. Like let's just like yeah, like let's let life take me wherever. I'll move here, I'll go here. But it is a different type of responsibility and weight when all of a sudden I'm married and I'm responsible for a family now, because that's what it is. It's like as a man, you're responsible for this family. So that's a pretty big decision that obviously had a lot of considerations. And so, what would you encourage people on? Because I think a lot of people wrestle with big decisions, and I have conversations a lot of times with people that are like, I just don't. They're afraid of choosing the wrong option, if that makes sense. Like a lot of people just get so gridlocked and freezed just because they're so afraid that they might choose the wrong option. So, what was your process in kind of dealing with that and making that decision for
Yeah,
yourself?
I think that there was a couple things. I think even backpacking off what we just said, you have to know the voices that are around you. So
Mm-hmm.
there were maybe about four people who I was like, if any of these four people would have told me, like, it's not the right move, like, really, really, honestly, like three people, if any of these
Yeah.
people said, hey, like, it was not the right move, I don't think you should do it, I would have strongly considered not moving, like strongly.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously like my wife and close friends and my pastors at the time, like people like that, like if they would have, if all of those people collectively would have said, hey, this is the wrong move, then I have to like trust that, okay, this is probably the wrong move.
Totally.
But having their blessings and obviously my wife having her blessing, like her blessing is obviously like a yes or no, like it's like, hey, do
Yeah.
you
Right.
feel
Yeah.
God in this?
Yeah.
It's like, you don't, okay, cool, we're staying,
Yeah. Never mind. Forget I
yeah,
said
yeah,
anything.
yeah, exactly. So I think that that's huge, is just identifying those people who can make, like, not make or break a decision, but who you strongly um whose advice you strongly take and consider, as well as I think knowing your season is just huge.
Yeah.
So we kind of knew the season that we were in, and I knew that what I personally and what my wife personally wanted to accomplish. So I think that was a huge thing too, of like, okay, this is a great way to get the ball rolling on some of our dreams and things that we want to get done. And then I think to anyone who's maybe concerned about making the wrong decision, the biggest thing that helped me the most is understanding that there's grace in anything. I think
Right.
I once heard a pastor say, they were like, how arrogant of us to believe that one decision could completely take us out of the will of God.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's like, just because if I would have decided to move out here and let's say it wasn't God's will for my life, I could have moved somewhere else in a year and been fine. Like, I think a lot of times we think, okay, if I make this decision, it's going to define the next 15 years of my life. And it's like,
Totally.
no,
Yep.
that's not the case. um so I would definitely say, the blessings of the people who you consider super strong, understanding your season, asking yourself, hey, what do I want out of this season? And what's the best avenue for that to happen? Obviously prayer. Like, we felt God had called us here, especially when we came out to visit. Like, we were both, like, after a couple of days of being here, we're like, okay, this is a no-brainer. Like, we want to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those things, and then also just realizing there's grace. Now, should I take that grace and just wildly be like, oh, I'm moving here, oh, I'm moving here, of course
Yeah.
not. But I think if anyone's struggling with that anxiety of, oh, well, what if I'm going to move and 10 years from now I'm not doing what God's called me to do? It's like, no, that's just not the case.
Totally. Yeah. I had a conversation probably a couple months ago with one of a young leader, and he was talking about, he's like, I just don't know what to do because like, what if I, he's deciding between jobs. He's like, what if I take this job and then it leads to this and then it leads to this, and all of a sudden we're talking like 20 years down the road. And I was like, dude, chill out a second. Like, and so I think at the end of the day, I told him, God values your heart above anything else. If your heart is to serve the Lord, of course you're going to make decisions that are probably wrong, like we all do. But if your heart's in the right place, then obviously it's not going to be like God's like, well, actually, I wanted you to do this and you missed it. So now here you go. There's going to be 40 years of a curse on your life. Like, that's not how it works. So that's great advice, though, to just make sure that A, you're consulting with people that you trust, and B, I think any action is better than no action, you know? And honestly, it's my opinion that I think we're talking, you said it, we're talking about a God of infinite grace, right? So maybe there's the best decision for your life. And if you don't do that at one point, at some point, obviously there's so much grace for you to where God's able to reroute that path for you in the long run. So that is good though in those large decisions to I think the important thing is to have action, to make a decision, you know?
Yeah, and that's huge. I think that I love that some action is better than inaction. And I think a lot of times we think like for example, the move to California, some people would say, "Oh, well, if you didn't move, that's inaction." And I think that if you're deciding to stay where you are, no, that's action, and you throw yourself into it. You stay faithful. You
Yeah.
grind. You do all that you can in the season that you're in. I think that a lot of times we think because it's not this huge transition that's not action. But no, being faithful is an action. We were faithful in Florida for 4 years, and that was an
Mm-hmm.
action. We had some different opportunities to go here, to go there, and we were like, no, like we feel God in this season was calling us there. That's an action.
Yep.
So I love that you said that, like, because you can even stay where you are and have inaction. You can just sit there and just grovel in your season. And it's like, no,
Right.
take where you're at, do all that you can, get everything you can out of it.
Cool. Well, we're going to take a second. We have something, a segment called the hot take segment. Okay. So this isn't going to be related to ministry at all. Actually, I mean, it might be a little bit. But basically, I'm going to rattle off some questions for you, and you're going to give your hot take on it. And so I know you're a basketball guy, so I got some basketball questions. I pretty much already know your answer based on your social media, but it's all right. So the first question is, in the great debate, do you have MJ or do you have LeBron?
Can I throw a third option in?
Whoa, dude, this is the exact heat that we need in hot takes. Yes, put in a third option.
This is the hot take section. Kobe Bryant,
Kobe Bryant is your all-time greatest.
all time go. I will say emotional. Like, I have no logic behind it. Don't ask me why.
Okay, that because that was my next question.
Yes. There is no logic. Don't send me stats like, oh, MJ
Yeah,
did
yeah,
this,
yeah.
LeBron did that. Like, I just don't care. Kobe's my goat. If I have to
Kobe's
choose
your
between
guy.
those two, though,
Uh-huh.
definitely MJ. MJ.
MJ.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this year, who's winning the NBA final?
Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah. Okay, I already know your take, but what's your take on the Brooklyn Nets right now?
I think, and this is gonna be really funny that this is being recorded, because if I'm wrong, like, someone could for sure like just go back and
If you're
expose me.
wrong, I'll delete the episode right away.
Yeah, just delete the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think they will implode. So we finally got
Whoa.
to see 100%. We finally got to see what they look like, all three of them together. Which when this podcast came out, they had just played the Cavs.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost double overtime.
They
Colin Sexton
did.
had 42 on Kyrie.
Yeah, he did.
I think their biggest holes are they traded away a great big in Jared Allen. They traded away their bench, and they don't play defense. Like, okay, you added James Harden, who can average 30 easily,
Yeah.
but he doesn't really play defense. Kyrie doesn't really play defense. KD just started playing defense like 2 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
they don't really have any defense. Like, if Colin Sexton drops 42 on you and you're laughing, like, that lets me know your defensive posture right there.
Right.
You know?
Defense wins championships, man.
Yeah, 100%. So I could see them going, Eastern Conference Finals or even to the finals. Like, I'm not crazy. I think that there's a chance they go to the finals.
Yeah.
I just don't think they defend well enough to win 4 games.
I like that take. That's a good one. Okay, switching lanes a little bit. Outside of your church, obviously, who's your favorite preacher to listen to?
Judah Smith.
Judah Smith?
Judah Smith. I love Judah Smith. And it's a tie between him and TD Jakes.
Every time I listen to TD Jakes, I feel like I can run through a brick wall.
100%. And that is like my litmus test for, like, okay, this is a preacher who to me is like one of the GOATs. Like, how do you feel while you're like listening to them? And there have been times when I'm in my car listening to TD Jakes and I'll like scream. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Okay. What have you read a book or listened to a podcast lately that you're all about?
Okay, so I'm all about the ruthless elimination of hurry. I don't know if you've heard about this book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this book is all about chilling out, basically. Like, hey, like, you're working super hard, which obviously we're supposed to do. but it's all about the Sabbath and how can you make sure that you're healthy? How can you run well? How can you rest well? So I read that book twice last year. That's probably going to be a book that I read again like twice this year. To where it's just insane to me, just the way that he can break down the importance of rest and
Hmm.
how our whole life, and honestly, the biggest thing that stuck out to me that I'll always remember is he talks about how technology was made for things to go faster so that we had more time to rest. So like they created the car because it was faster than a horse, so that you could get to where you want to go
Right.
and you could have more time to rest. But instead of traveling the exact same amount of miles faster, we're just traveling more miles. And I think that just like completely relates to our culture, to where now
Yeah.
we can do things so fast, like social media. You can go on social media, drop a video and get famous like fast. Like
Right.
you can get influence fast. And I think instead of taking that as a way of doing the same amount of things, like building people up and
Hmm.
encouraging people, now we're just doing more stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, so I would say that's a book that just wrecks me every time I read it, and it's
Right.
just so good.
Yeah, that's it's a good point too, because I think that, and I've talked about this a little bit with my friends, but the accessibility of everything is amazing. But I think it almost has eliminated a lot of people's ability to like critically think about things. Because I think about myself all the time of like, if I'm ever wondering something historically or whatever, or problem solving, like to put this sign up, I had a huge hole right here, right? So, but I don't know how to patch a hole. So, like, I'm looking it up, like on YouTube and everything. And so, because answers are so accessible, we aren't able to struggle with things. And I think you learn so much when you actually struggle with something and you like look at it and you actually have to problem solve. And so I think a lot of times, like especially as leaders, like we're always looking for answers when there's so much more in the struggle of like the learning that we can accomplish when we're actually trying to figure something out ourselves. So I haven't read all of it, but I'm actually in the process. We haven't even talked about this, but I'm in the process of reading that book, and it's been incredible. So, what I want to talk about now is youth pastoring in the middle of COVID, because COVID has just been, I mean, unprecedented, obviously. And so we've never experienced this. And you said that you took this job right when COVID started. So I'm curious as to how you've been operating in that, and maybe what you've observed from how the youth are for COVID. I mean, I'm thinking of like, man, if it was my senior year of high school, right, and I didn't get to play soccer and I didn't get to be with my friends, like how that would take a toll on me. And so, how has it been for you, kind of stepping into a youth job during COVID?
Yeah, I think that something I've observed in the students, and even in the parents, honestly, is just how important any type of in-person gathering is. Like, I think
Right.
that the parents were just so thankful. So we started these things called fall nights, to where we literally just hung out with students at like restaurants downtown. Like, we didn't have any type of ultimatum. We weren't like trying to pack the place out. Like we were literally just like, hey, we just want to give you a place to hang out with your friends
Yeah.
downtown outside that's safe. And when they stopped and we were going to do one big event and we had to cancel it because of COVID, things went south. And literally the day we were supposed to have our event, they were like, hey, no more gatherings, things like that. Um, and you could just see like parents just emails like, hey, can we please just do something in person soon? Like the online stuff, like they're online all day for school, they're online all day for this, they can't see their friends, can we please? So you just really understand
Yeah.
like how much of a pastor that students need. Like students, I think youth pastor can sometimes come across as this arrogant thing to where it's about the big events and it's about the
Hmm.
services and it's about doing all of this different stuff. But I think what I've just learned over COVID, and what I think after talking through to just a few youth pastors, it's like, no, like we're called to actually pastor our students through some of the hardest times of their lives. Like students
Right.
right now are, like you said, it's unprecedented. They don't have older siblings to ask advice from. They don't have
Hmm.
like parents who can tell them, hey, I couldn't hang out with my friends for almost a year. Like I know how this feels. There was a guy who was at our youth ministry at one of our events who hadn't left his house in like 4 months. Like it's like they don't have people who can do that. So I think
Right.
just understanding um how you can create a win in your season, I think that's like the biggest thing that I've had to learn, because right now our win as a now almost a year old youth ministry, our win isn't a huge conference event that's going to pack the place out. Like that's not a win right now. A win for us is just creating an environment where students can have a positive influence in their life and that they can hang out with their friends. Because I think COVID, what I've seen and what I've noticed is that it can be really easy to just kind of lay back
Mm-hmm.
and just like take anything, you know, like I could have easily came out, took this job and just really not really done anything for six
Yeah.
months. And because it was COVID, like that might have even been acceptable. That might have even been normal or as seen as something that was okay. Um, but I think what I had to learn is that you have to go all in for what your win is. So if our win is having these fall nights at restaurants, if our win is having these events in people's backyard, well, then we have to go all in for those wins. We have to do all that we can for those wins. Or even through like just playing Fortnite with students. Like it's like I had never played Fortnite before until COVID. And then all of a
Right.
sudden, COVID came and my students are playing Fortnite. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to play Fortnite. I'm going to figure it
Yeah.
out. Or even coaching. Like I coached one of the teams in the area. So I think that what I've seen is that you just have to pastor students and you just have to figure out what your win is in this season. So we're
Mm-hmm.
starting some really cool stuff this spring and we're identifying our wins and what we can do to really connect with our community and connect with our students. And I think that that's the biggest thing I've learned is whatever
Yeah.
your win is in your business and your family and in your ministry, you have to go all in for that. Like don't hold back and make sure that everything that you do creates that win for your team.
Yeah, that's good. I think it almost, I mean, society kind of stopped altogether at some, I mean, well, literally everything closed down for a couple months, but it almost brought a forced, thought and perspective of getting to the heart of pastoring people. And that's, making sure that you're caring for the individual. When you don't have the opportunity to gather people, you have to make those individual touches, phone calls, and check up on people. And I think that's what, I mean, that honestly, like I texted a buddy of mine that moved away, and I haven't seen him for a while, but I just texted him today, and I was like, "Hey, man, just want to let you know that I'm praying for you. You're on my heart." And he replied, he's like, "Oh wow, like I can't, I'm going through something right now, and it means a lot to me that you texted me and reached out." And so it's just crazy the actual impact that individual conversations and touches mean, because I think a lot of times, unfortunately, they're like, in my opinion, I think large gatherings, like in general, not like COVID, but like in the world general, but normally large gatherings is a huge win for the church, right? 1,500 person conference, that's amazing because there's so many people getting touched and affected by what's happening. But I think there is a population that's like, well, it's just all about numbers. It's all about the masses. So I think this season almost forced everybody to kind of reconsider, hey, we do this for the one person,
And
And
I think
that's
that's
the
huge too, is just understanding what season you're in. Like, will there be a
totally
season where we're throwing a camp or a conference and our win is, yes, let's pack the place out. Let's reach every single student in the area. Of course. But is that a realistic win right now for a year-old youth ministry that can't even meet in
right,
person?
right. And California's like locked down.
Yeah. We're on stay-at-home order. Like you can't eat
Yeah,
outside. Like I'm golfing like
right.
4 times a week just to get out of the house.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Okay, awesome. And the last thing that I kind of want to touch on is, has there been any learning curves for you in your first year? Has there been anything that has surprised you about accepting this pastor job in your first year? I know that, I come into a lot of contact with people that are like, yeah, I want to be a pastor, which is amazing, which is an incredible call on their life. But I think sometimes maybe we don't understand the whole picture of everything. So has there been challenges that you faced this year with
Yeah.
it?
I think that the biggest thing that I had to learn was just the importance of team and building
Mm,
culture. So when I moved out here, the youth ministry consisted of about 6 to 7 kids and
yep.
about 6 to 8 leaders. And what they did was they met every Wednesday night or every other Wednesday night. They watched videos on the screen and then they played games. And that was the youth ministry like that. The kids loved it. Leaders loved leading it. Um, so one of the things that I had to do when I came out here was, okay, I have to build a team and transition and build culture and set new culture and create new new things. So did we lose people on the team? Of course, because that's going to happen in any transition.
Right.
But I also had to learn the importance of pastoring a team, of building a team, of pouring into teams. So my pretty much first 6 months, and even now, and probably for the rest of my time as a pastor anywhere, will always be things like coffees and golf with leaders and pouring into our team. A concept that our pastor here in California talks about a lot is this concept of core community crowd, and just pouring into your core, and pouring into your core until then it becomes a community, and the community can reach a crowd. So that's like, I think that the biggest thing that I've had to learn is that, because me, I'm, like I said earlier, I'm a 3, like I'm an achiever. I want to pour into everyone. I want to reach everyone. I want to do everything on my own. Like there are some times where we've had an event and Paige, my wife, will be like, hey, like it's the day of the event. Hey, what are you doing this morning before the event? And I'll be like, oh, I'm running a Target to get this. I'm doing this. I'm setting up this. I'm running this. I'm doing this. And she's like, hey, like, you don't, like, you shouldn't be doing everything, like not even in like like you're the youth pastor, you shouldn't be doing it. She's like, hey, like you can't sustain this way. Like when events are like moving forward, you have to have a team. So I would say that's the biggest thing that I've learned is you have to continuously just build your team, just love your team, pastor your team, and just always be willing to do anything you can for your team, because you can only go as far as your team goes. Like if your team's not good, you're not going to go far. I mean, we talked about basketball and all the teams in the NBA. Like you have people who can't win. And the reason why is because their team just isn't good enough. Like you see these guys who are teamed up with, like James Harden. The reason why he said he left, because he knew their team wasn't good enough. He said they couldn't win. And he's one of the best scorers in the league. Averages like over 30 a game, and he couldn't win. So you only can go as far as your team allows you to, and you have to figure out a way to set your team up for success. That makes sense.
It's great. Well, honestly, that's all we have time for today. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I know that everybody that's listening or watching is going to gain a lot from it. And so we've learned a lot from your first year. And I know that, the next few years is only going to be up for you and your team over there at Mission Church. But again, thank you for joining the podcast. I really do appreciate you coming on.